Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, I'm so glad we get to do a podcast today, not just because there's plenty of NBA news to talk about, like a lot of NBA news, but I don't know if you knew this, Sap, or if any of our listeners knew this. I'm a teacher in the Newton public school system, and we've been on strike since Friday, and so I've had literally nothing to do. So I'm happy to be able to fill my time with something.
Absolutely. I mean, you can follow the NBA even closer. You can go to movies. You can get some R&R, which is also very important. But hopefully that gets resolved so you can get back to the work that you need to do and like to do, and also get the students back in the classrooms. Hopefully that ends soon.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of strange days here in Newton right now, but that doesn't affect what's going on in the NBA. And yesterday was just a crazy, crazy day for the league with I can't remember this ever happening, except Adrian Griffin, first-year head coach for the Milwaukee Bucks, who are in second place in the Eastern Conference, was summarily fired. And the Bucks then turned around and hired Doc Rivers, fresh off the ESPN announce table, to be their new head coach. So Griffin goes 30-13, and because the Bucks weren't happy with presumably their defense, which has not been good, they don't even give him to the end of the season. Sap, this is one of the most surprising firings that I can ever remember in NBA history.
Yeah, at least David Blatt got like a year and a half before he got fired by LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers nearly a decade ago. Remember, he got them to the finals. They lost to Golden State in 6 games, came back the next year and around midseason. It was apparent that he and LeBron James weren't jiving. They moved on from David Blatt. Ty Lue stepped in and did a fantastic job, and the Cavaliers won the championship in June of 2016. Yeah, 30-13, so he's fired with like a tremendous winning percentage. And as you said, the second best record in basketball. Their defense had been so porous this year. Last year, they were fourth in defense efficiency rating. This year, 21st. Now, when you trade Drew Holiday, who's one of the best defensive perimeter players in the league, and you get back Damian Lillard, great offensive player, but a poor defensive player, you're going to have some slippage in defense. Also, they're kind of an old, unathletic team at this point, which is difficult saying because they have Giannis.
Right.
Giannis, I think, is not the defender he was, say, 3 or 4 years ago. Maybe wear and tear, injuries, lack of interest. He's a great help defender. Like, he'll come over from the weak side, block shots. Brook Lopez is a guy who, is a rim protector, but they've got some old guys out there.
I think with
Bobby
Giannis,
Portis,
Seth, it's the LeBron syndrome of I'll play defense when I want to
exactly.
play defense.
Right. Yeah. And superstar players, this is what happens. It happens with Joel Embiid. It happens with any other great player, even Kawhi Leonard, who's been a defensive player of the year. At times they take possessions off. So you're going to see that from superstar players. So the defensive performances have been really porous this year. And now the players are going to blame Blake Griffin because it's easier to replace the coach than replace the players. I mean, that's a cliche to say the least, but it's very true at that point. And in steps Doc Rivers, who was a paid consultant to the Bucks while being a broadcaster for ESPN.
I didn't know that.
That seems to be a conflict of interest. I
Massive,
mean, I guess
he
was consulting Adrian Griffin the last month, maybe as a mentor, but this
he walks over his dead body to get the
kind of the Ides of March came in January this year instead of March. Et tu Brute. Let's go with my Roman history lesson of the podcast. But and here's Doc Rivers with now his 5th team as the head coach. And look, I love Doc. I really do, because when I covered the league in the 80s, he was the go-to guy for the Atlanta Hawks as a player. You'd go talk to Doc at shoot-arounds, before games, after games, no matter what. He was very engaging. You could tell he was going to be a coach, a broadcaster, and be very good at those things. He was a very engaging guy. But we've seen a lot of failures with Doc Rivers. He does have the one championship 16 years ago with the Celtics. But, Jet, in 7 separate series, he's blown 3-1 leads in 3 of those series and 3-2 leads in 4 other series. Meaning in 7 series as a head coach, he's gone 0-17 in closeout games. No other coach in NBA history comes even close to that. So this is what you're going to get in Milwaukee. This just goes back to Giannis, right? Giannis, who we both love, but now has become the diva-ish NBA star who, if he doesn't get his way, the coach is going to get fired. So now is Is he a coach killer? He wanted Budenholzer out at the end of last year, Adrian Griffin out at the end of the middle of the season. And look, if this doesn't work out, Doc might last a half a year here or a year and a half, and then move on from Doc and bring in the next coach. I mean, Giannis is now a coach killer, a diva, just like every other player in the NBA, and it's not his fault. It's just the culture of the league, and he's one of the best players, and he's going to speak up, and ownership is going to listen to Giannis because they don't want to lose him. That's why they went out and got Damian Lillard. They had to make a big move to bring in a superstar to please Giannis. And look, they're 30-13, but you can see their defense has really been atrocious. And like, they can't beat the Indiana Pacers. It seems like they play the Pacers every other game and lose. And they've had some really poor performances. Heck, the other night, didn't Detroit score 135 against them? Like,
Yeah.
that should never happen. So, yeah,
Still won.
This was a move made. They still won, yeah, because Indiana doesn't play much defense either, and Milwaukee could put points on the board. But a surprise somewhat, but in the NBA, even a half a season of success means nothing if the star player doesn't want you as the coach.
Yeah, sixth worst defense in terms of opponent point per game for the Milwaukee Bucks, just right above the San Antonio Spurs and Atlanta Hawks. So yeah, no, not a good defensive unit by any stretch of the imagination. But to me, I think you make a good point, Sap, with calling him, kind of a coach killer. And I think people have been reticent to do that because he is so likable and stuff like that. But at some point, players become frustrated with their circumstance, and the coach is the easiest person to blame in a lot of those circumstances. So, Giannis is going to speak up. And I think, again, I hate that you do this to me, Sap. I sometimes find myself defending LeBron when I'm on the podcast with you, even though I don't want to. LeBron gets that title, which I think is fair. And so then, Giannis should also get that title. I mean, he's gone through two coaches now in half a season. Who have been successful. Budenholzer won a championship with them. I know they weren't successful in the playoffs last year, but again, Budenholzer did win a title with the Bucks. And to this point in the season, Adrian Griffin, for a first-year head coach, having at this point in the season a 30-10 record, or something around, that's what it is, right?
30-13. 30-13. They're only 3.5 games behind the Celtics. Yeah.
So I want to make this point too, Sep. This was the guy that Giannis handpicked to be the coach of the team. They could have gotten Doc Rivers in the offseason had they wanted to. Doc Rivers was free and clear of the 76ers. They'd gotten rid of him and moved on to Nick Nurse. And they could have absolutely gotten Doc Rivers had they offered him the job. But Giannis said, no, I want to go with Adrian Griffin. And that obviously was not to his liking, even though that was his handpicked coach. So, I think Lillard also had something to do with it too. I don't want to put it all on Giannis because I'm sure Lillard has a strong voice in that organization too, and he is desperate to win a championship, something Giannis has already accomplished in his career. And from what I understand, Lillard wasn't thrilled with some of the offensive schemes that Adrian Griffin was offering. But at the same time, I just don't see what Doc Rivers can do to just magically make them better defensively, which is where they need the most help. I think Doc is a really good coach, but I mean, he can't just snap his fingers and suddenly they're going to only be giving up 110 points a game. That's not how it works.
Is he bringing Tom Thibodeau with him, who was the defensive specialist on the 08 Celtics championship team? Oh, no, wait a second. Thibodeau's coaching the Knicks, and they're overperforming, to say the least. The Knicks have been a surprise team in the Eastern Conference. From what I understand is in the offseason, they interviewed 20 candidates for the head coaching position, which is actually more candidates than Arthur Blank is interviewed for the head coaching position with the Atlanta Falcons. It feels like the Atlanta Falcons with 14 coaching interviews, that process has taken longer than one season of, You've Got Talent or
Right.
American Idol. Like, it's just going on forever. Well, that apparently happened with the Milwaukee Bucks. And you don't hear as much in the offseason in the NBA with coaching positions because people never quite think of coaches in the NBA being as important as coaches in the NFL. Like, all we've heard about the last 2 weeks is, where's Bill Belichick going? Where's Mike Vrabel going? Where's Jim Harbaugh going? Because those are important things. Where in basketball, it's kind of like, okay, here's the next coach. If the player doesn't like him, they're going to get rid of him. So they interviewed 20 candidates. They whittled it down to 8. And from what I understand, this isn't me breaking news. It's just things you hear on radio, or I think it was The Athletic that had this story, or The Ringer, or whatever. It came down to Giannis, Damian Lillard, and Drew Holiday were the 3 players that interviewed the players, and they picked Griffin as the head coach. Of course, 2 weeks later, Holiday was traded to the Celtics. So maybe he knew he was on his way out. Was traded actually to Portland, then Portland traded him to the Celtics. So maybe he knew he was on the way out. Said, let me pick the worst coach for the Bucks because I'm out of here in a couple of weeks. And they picked Adrian Griffin, and it just hasn't worked out. Now we'll see, like you said, with Doc Rivers. Again, if Giannis is more pleased, he's going to play better. It should filter down. But Lillard, as marvelous as a player as he is a defensive liability. As I said, Giannis doesn't play defense the way he used to. Brook Lopez is ancient. Middleton doesn't move as well, doesn't play defense like he used to. Bobby Portis feels like is 10 years older than he is. It's not a real athletic team. So that's part of the problem with defense. The philosophy under Budenholzer always used to be guard the lane, give up the threes. Well, that doesn't always work because there's a lot of great three-point shooting teams in the league. Now they're trying to defend the three more feverishly, and that's opening up things inside for, a lot of easy layups and dunks, et cetera. So, you just have to look at it that way. But Doc's back in the league, and it's just really weird that he was some sort of consultant to Adrian Griffin and then took his job. Like I said, the Ides of March come in January this year.
Yeah. And I have to assume Adrian Griffin will land on his feet in this next cycle, find a head coaching job because he did a good job.
You think so? Yeah, I mean the record's good, but now all of a sudden it gets around to players that maybe
I guess
not
it
the
depends.
Right guy.
It depends with what happens behind the scenes, Sap.
Sure.
I think that if there was bad stuff behind the scenes, then yeah, maybe he won't. But I think a team will look and say, well, he put on a 30-13 record, and despite their defense being horrible, he's worth a run. He was a guy who was long considered to be a head coaching finalist candidate for several cycles, and then he finally got this job. And the record would indicate that he's doing a fine job. It's the same thing, Sep. Like last year, I thought the Celtics would have been well within their rights to can Mazzulla because they didn't even really have a coaching search. The Bucks had a full-on coaching search and hired Adrian Griffin. The Celtics were forced basically a week before the season because of what happened to Ime Udoka to just go with Joe Mazzulla. And I don't think he availed himself particularly well, though their record was pretty good. It wasn't as good as the Bucks record is this year, and they decided to keep him. And I think some Celtics fans were on board with that, some are not. But you see two completely different organizational philosophies, and maybe you see a difference between the star players and Jason Tatum, who by all accounts seems to support Joe Mazzulla, and Giannis, who was ready to throw Adrian Griffin out the door the second he got the chance.
I think also what happened here is Damian Lillard got acquired by the Bucks in the offseason from Portland. Milwaukee brought in Terry Stotts, who used to be his coach in Portland several years ago before Chauncey Billups took over. And then Stotts resigned before the season even started, or very early in the season, because he had a blow-up with Adrian Griffin. So maybe right off the bat, Lillard had a hair across his ass for Griffin by saying, hey, my coach came here, and I'm sure they brought Stotts in to please Damian Lillard. This is what happens in the NBA. It happens somewhat in the NFL for star quarterbacks. Look at the New York Jets. I mean, they brought in coaches and players to appease Aaron Rodgers. He gets hurt, and you're stuck with those below-average offensive coordinator or players because that's what the quarterback wanted. So I'm sure Lillard was like, hey, bring in Terry Stotts to be kind of my personal coach. Well, then Stotts has a blowout with Adrian Griffin. He's gone, so I'm sure Lillard right off the bat wasn't happy. And again, we knew it was going to take a little bit of time for Lillard and Giannis to work their things out because I still think Giannis is too ball dominant. They still run their offense through Giannis, who I've always felt like he would be even more effective if you maybe had him on the wing as a slasher or have him post up. I mean, the man is 7 feet tall, and he's got pretty decent touch around the basket. Let him get some easy points there rather than having him steamrolling down the middle of the court trying to set up other players. Maybe his assists can go down, but his points can go up and his efficiency can go up. I think that that's something that they're going to have to work out. But Doc is good, or he has been good at managing stars. Again, It didn't necessarily work that great with Philadelphia with Embiid and Harden. Embiid did win an MVP. I get that, but they got knocked out in the second round every year. And with the Clippers, he had a ready-made team when he got there with Chris Paul and Blake Griffin. They fell short. And then he ends up with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. They came up short on several occasions. I was just thinking this the other day before he was even hired. Doc's coached like a dozen Hall of Famers.
Yeah,
like it's not for lack of talent. A ton of guys. And I'm not even including Rajon Rondo. I mean, that would be like his 13th Hall of Famer. Just look at the guys he's coached. Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady in Orlando. We know he coached with the Celtics with Garnett, Pierce, Allen. Maybe Rondo's a Hall of Famer. Blake Griffin, maybe a Hall of
Borderline.
Famer.
Chris
Obviously,
Paul
Chris
for
Paul,
sure. Yep.
obviously. Kawhi Leonard, obviously. Paul George,
Embiid.
borderline Hall of Famer.
Yep.
Embiid, Harden, like a ton of Hall of Famers. Now he's got two
Yep.
more that he's going to coach. So he's had a lot of talent, and he's supposed to make that work, and it worked once with the Celtics. And like I said, in those 7 series that he's coached, 3 times blowing a 3-1 series lead, 4 times blowing a 3-2 series lead in those 7 series, totally different series, 0-17 in closeout games. I mean, that some of that has to fall on the coach. Also has to fall on the players. We saw last year, games 6 and 7, after having a 3-2 lead over the Celtics, Embiid and Harden were disastrous in those games. You got to blame them as much as you have to blame Doc Rivers. But again, Embiid's not going anywhere. Harden worked his way out of Philadelphia. Doc got fired, and Doc's resurfaced. And the thing with Doc is he's always going to resurface, whether it's a coach, as a broadcaster. He's very likable. Players, executives, people that run ESPN or TNT. I mean, he's an easy guy to like. He's always going to find work. Not that he needs the money, but he's just a very, very likable guy.
Yeah, and at this point, he's been around the league for 40 years. So he's an NBA lifer.
He sure is. I mean, he came into the league in 1983. He was drafted out of Marquette in the 2nd round, and
just over 40 years. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's laughable when people say, well, he has connections to Milwaukee because he played at Marquette. Yeah, 40 years ago. I mean, do you think, like, unless you're 55 years old and you're a Bucks fan, you don't remember Doc Rivers at Marquette. I'm 60. I remember Doc at Marquette. It was kind of interesting that he fell to the 2nd round because coming out of high school, he was one of the highest recruits in the country in 1980. Went to Marquette, spent 3 years there, and then was a 2nd round pick and had a really nice career with the Hawks and Knicks and Clippers, and like you said, NBA lifer. And again, easy guy to root for, very likable guy. But again, he's had a lot of, I wouldn't say misfortune, but he's fallen short several years as a head coach with a lot of talent.
Yeah, no, that's true. The funny thing is he was revered in Boston and chose to leave Boston for what he thought was a better situation with the Clippers, but the Celtics have made the conference finals numerous times, and Doc, since he left, and Doc has yet to appear back in the conference finals. So maybe this is the year. Maybe he gets there back with the Bucks. It's certainly he's fallen ass backwards into a really enviable situation. Where you have 2 superstar players and a team that has championship aspirations. He's certainly not a rebuild or anything along those lines. But I don't know what he can do and install on the fly that will suddenly make the Bucks' issues just go away. That seems to me to be hard to believe.
Will Giannis and Dame Lillard be happy? Then they'll play better.
Maybe that could be simple as that.
Simple. Yeah, exactly. I mean, defense, a lot of it is effort, especially with Giannis. We know he can play better defense than he's played. Lillard, I think he's limited defensively, but if they're happy with their head coach and not worrying about if he's got the right schemes and that he takes care of a lot of those secondary things that a coach has to take care of, then they'll play much freer and they'll play much better.
Yeah, well, it remains to be seen. It is certainly a really interesting move, and I was shocked by the news, but that this is, I guess, the new NBA SAP is that it's championship or bust for a lot of these teams, and if they feel like their coach isn't putting them in a position to win a title when those are your aspirations, then I guess now you make the move at mid-season, and so that's exactly what the Bucks did. Other teams aren't going to just let the Bucks try to improve without doing it themselves, as the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference swung a deal SAP yesterday to acquire Terry Rozier, old Celtic friend, from the Charlotte Hornets, who are just a dumpster fire of a team and are going to have a fire sale. But fortunately for Miami, Terry Rozier is having a career year, 23 points a game, 6.5 assists, almost 4 rebounds a game, shooting 46% from the floor. This is a guy that is going to be able to help Miami where it needs the most help, which is scoring the basketball, because their offense, similar to last year, despite them making the finals, is putrid. Their offense is one of the lowest scoring in the league, Sap. They average 100 and just a shade under 111 points a game, which is, let's see, third worst in the Eastern Conference. And so now they have Terry Rozier to try to help. And they gave up, by the way, Kyle Lowry at a protected first-round pick.
Yeah, great move for Miami because you get a much younger player who can still contribute for a bad contract with a player that, quite frankly, is washed up in Kyle Lowry. The future first-round pick is 3 years down the road. No need to worry about that. So now at least you have what would appear to be 4 legitimate scorers on Miami: Butler, Adebayo, Hero, and now Terry Rozier. So that can open up everything offensively for his teammates. And look, Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, who did very well last year with Miami, went on and got free agent contracts elsewhere. They're not performing at the same level they did in Miami. I think Miami's offense will give Terry Rozier an opportunity to shine. And again, if you get 3 of those guys getting you 20 plus on a given night, and the fourth guy, even if he gives you 15 or 16 on a given night, at least you have more balance and more depth scoring wise. It's a great move for the Miami Heat. They're right back in contention in the Eastern Conference. If you want to layer the contenders in the Eastern Conference, the Celtics are the favorites. They really are. Because I think their starting lineup is the best in basketball. They could probably use one more depth piece before we get out of the trade deadline, which is only 2 weeks away. Then I would say Philadelphia, because they have right now, quite frankly, maybe the best player in the league, or at least the best player in the Eastern Conference in Joel Embiid. You have Milwaukee, of course. Then the next level would probably be Cleveland, Miami, the Knicks. The Knicks just overperform and are just a pain in the butt to play against. But I think Miami's right in there, and no one wants to see them in the postseason because they are just mentally tough. They'll play defense, and now they've added a scorer in Terry Rozier. They're always going to be a tough out.
Yeah, and that's where they shine, is in the postseason. And right now they're 24-19, which puts them in the play-in tournament, but only by half a game to the Indiana Pacers, who also improved their roster a week ago, adding Pascal Siakam as they wait for the return of Tyrese Halliburton. So it's gonna be an interesting race in that play-in tournament spot, Sap, because there's a couple teams: the Knicks, the Pacers, the Cavs, the Heat, and the Magic, who are all bunched up within a game or 2 of each other. And, one of those teams, or 2 of those teams, are going to end up in the play-in. And so, when you're talking about a 1-game or 2-game elimination situation, you could lose your season there. Miami was in the play-in last year, and they made it all the way to the finals. I agree with you, Sap. Great trade for the Heat. I'm surprised that Charlotte wasn't able to get more for guy who's 29 and scoring 23 points a game and is under contract control. It's not a cheap contract, but the way the contracts are going up, it's reasonable. And a protected first-round pick and a guy who's essentially shot in Kyle Lowry is really nothing. I assume that the Hornets are just going to waive him or redirect him. He has no purpose on that team. So I think great trade for the Heat. But for the Hornets, I am surprised they couldn't get anything more than that.
I am too, Jet. Don't you think that another team that was either a contending team or a team that wanted to put itself above the play-in tournament would have made inquiries for Terry Rozier? I always think of the Lakers because they need some help. They really do. I mean, they got LeBron James and Anthony Davis both playing at a very high level, but they can't quite find that third player to contribute. D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves, they just haven't stepped up enough. They could use another piece, and I think Terry Rozier would have been a nice piece for the Lakers. Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan. I'm sure the Bulls may look to trade one or both of those guys by the trade deadline. And you mentioned Kyle Lowry. Can't you just see him ending up with the Lakers at some point? Like,
Sure.
again,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
if the money works out, if Charlotte has to eat some of the money, he's a veteran player. I'm sure LeBron likes and respects him, and those are the types of players that the Lakers have a tendency to add. But yeah, I thought they could have got more than what they got for Terry Rozier, who, again, I think is a guy who put up 23 points per game on a bad team. And
Oh,
we see
yeah.
that a lot in the NBA. I mean, it's like 23 points per game like 15 years ago would have you like 7th in the league in scoring. Now it has you like 27th in the league in scoring because it's just like everyone it seems to get 25 points per game. But no, he'll be a real good addition to that team. And again, he's going to a place where it seems when you show up there, you become a better player on both ends of the court.
Absolutely. And they'll have moments in the playoffs for sure. And it addresses their biggest need right now, which is scoring. And yes, he's putting up 23 points on a bad team, so his points per game will go down. But the important stat is that he's able to score 23 points a game. That's what matters to Miami, is that if they need some scoring and Butler's not on because he's streaky sometimes, then, Rozier is just another option. But yeah, if I was another team, especially in somewhat of contention, I definitely would have tried to outbid the Heat on that, because they gave away a piece that, like, Kyle Lowry is a great leader. He's a champion in his league, but he's just shot at this point. He's 37. He's averaging 8 points a game, 4 assists a game. He's not in great shape. Not that he's ever been in great shape. And he's injured frequently too. So I'm not sure from the Hornets' perspective why they did that. And the Heat have some young guys that they could have potentially traded, like Nikola Jovic. Like, I don't know why Charlotte didn't ask for that. They're just, I mean, I do know why. They're not a well-run organization. They haven't been well-run, virtually since their inception. Michael Jordan era, pre-Michael Jordan era, post-Michael Jordan era, it seems. So not surprising, but for the rest of the East, frustrating, because the Heat certainly got better without giving up anything of significance. And staying in the Eastern Conference, it looks like it's going to be, very, very competitive at the top there, because Indiana, as we mentioned, got better. Now Miami got better. The Knicks have been playing over their heads. The Celtics are great. Milwaukee's played well despite firing their coach. Maybe it's an upgrade with getting Doc Rivers. And Philadelphia looks like they have the best player in the league right now in Joel Embiid, who the other night put up a 70 spot against the San Antonio Spurs. 70 points on 24 of 41 shooting. 41 is a lot of shots to take in a game. He was 20 of 23 from the free throw line. Very impressive. 18 rebounds, 5 assists he managed to sneak in there, a block, a steal, and they won that game 133 to 123. And so Embiid sets a new franchise record for the 76ers. Also on that same night, as just a footnote, Karl-Anthony Towns scored 62 points in a losing effort, but Embiid gets the headline with 70. I was surprised that was the franchise record, considering Wilt played on the 76ers, but I guess he put up all his points when he was on the Warriors.
Yeah, exactly. When he was on the Warriors is when he scored the 100 points back in 1963 against the Knicks. So, like you said, Embiid was so efficient on that night, right? 24-41 is nearly 60%. He only took 2 3-pointers, hit one of them. And then the thing that's amazing about Embiid, 21 of 23 from the free throw line. He's a great free throw shooter. Look at his numbers this year.
He's almost at 90%, Sap, from the free throw line this year.
Almost at 90%. That is phenomenal. He's averaging 36 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 assists this year. Is he the best player in the league? No, I think Nikola Jokic is, but he's a close second at this point, and I think he's the front runner for MVP, because those numbers are staggering. And look, Giannis and Luka, they round out the top 4 players in the world, in my opinion. Whatever order you want, I would go Jokic, Embiid, Giannis, and Luka. Those would be the top 4 players. LeBron, Durant, and Curry, they're on the back 9. I kind of put them aside, and then I put 3 young studs that are on the come. They're not quite in that top 4. To me, it's Jason Tatum, SGA, and Anthony Edwards. Those are the 3 players to look at and say, okay, they're ready to maybe take over the league at some point when those top 4 players aren't quite the same, although Luka's younger than most of those guys anyway, so he's always going to be and play as the top player. But 36, 12, and 6 is what he's averaging when we're talking about Joel Embiid on 34 minutes per game. To average more points than minutes is phenomenal. And to be that efficient, Jet, incredible. Now,
yeah, he shoots 54% from the floor, Sap, on average.
At 36 from 3. And he's not taking as many threes. He only took 2 the other night. He realizes that he's unstoppable in the post. His mid-range game is exquisite. It really is. I mean, his touch is phenomenal. It really is. I mean, look, Shaquille O'Neal, who throws compliments around like manhole covers, especially when he's talking about centers, said that Joel Embiid is more talented than he was. And in terms of pure basketball talent, he's right. He doesn't always play as hard as Shaq played. Shaq was a brute force on the court. He was unstoppable. He was intimidating. Embiid at times seems to be distracted, maybe not the best conditioned player in the league, and neither was Shaq, quite frankly. But he was just so physically gifted. Both of these guys so physically gifted. Embiid, I'm shocked at what he's done this year, because I thought after winning the MVP, he'd take a step back. He's actually taken a step forward. Give him a ton of credit for that. Now, 70 points. He only played 37 minutes. So if he was able to play 48 minutes at that pace, he would have scored 91, 92 points. Now, we're starting to get into Wilt Chamberlain territory in terms of the 100-point game. There's one record in sports. There's a few records in sports I think will never be approached. Joe DiMaggio's 56 game hitting streak, I don't think will ever be approached. Wayne Gretzky's 2,800 points will not be approached because someone would have to average 140 points per year for 20 years to approach it, which I just can't see that happening. The 100-point game, I don't see happening.
Yeah, Jerry Rice's receiving yards is not going to be approached.
He's like 5,000-6,000 above everybody, and he was still phenomenal at 40. I mean, like Brady's passing yards records, Patrick Mahomes sticks around 10, 12 more years.
He could beat it.
Maybe.
He could beat it. And the rushing record's untouchable now because the running backs could flame out too early. So
exactly. Yep, exactly.
But yeah, the 100-point game, that's a good point, Sep.
I I'm 99% sure it won't be touched. This guy could approach it. And here's the thing. When Wilt Chamberlain scored 100 points, he was 36 of 63 from the floor. Okay, so that's 57%. That's outstanding. And Wilt was a 60% shooter because he was just so big, strong, and gifted. There wasn't a three-point shot then, and I don't think Wilt would have taken many of those anyway.
No.
The thing that Wilt did that night, he was 28 of 32 from the free throw line. Now, Wilt was like a 50% shooter from the free throw line. He just had an incredible night, gave him the 100 points. Embiid, like you said, just an 89% free throw shooter. So can he play 48 minutes in a game? That's the big thing. I mean, if he was able to do that, he could make a run at it. He's that good.
Yeah, he is. It would have to be against the right opponent, where he could. That's kind of surprising that it was against San Antonio because it's not like, Wembanyama could stop him, but he is the league leader in shot blocks per game. So, he wasn't playing against.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point.
A bum. I still don't see it, Sap. I mean, listen, 70 is incredible. And it does seem to be happening more frequently as the scoring's going up and the 3-point shooting's going up. And he did it by only hitting 1 3-point shot, as you were saying. So conceivably, if he got really hot from 3, I mean, there's games where he takes 7 or 8 threes, so he could hit 4 or 5 of them. That would certainly boost it. But man, it would have to be also a really close game. And his conditioning is not to the point where I feel like he would play every minute in a game.
That's the problem.
If it was an overtime game, Sap, would you still count it, or would people not count it, do you think?
No, I think they would still count it because, look, Jordan set the playoff record in a double overtime game. When he scored 63 against the Celtics.
Was that double overtime?
Single or double overtime, yeah. Elgin Baylor held the record, but that was in a 48-minute game. It's kind of strange that I can't remember if it was single or double overtime because I was sitting courtside for that game. Still one of the most incredible things I ever saw. I mean, but again, if Michael Jordan, whatever records he has, no one can ever push back against because it's Michael Jordan.
That one's going to go.
Broke it,
that one's going to
be playoff record.
Toppled.
That could go.
The playoff one's going to be toppled. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're talking about not all-time great players like we're in the 50s, right? Donovan Mitchell was in the 50s. Jamal Murray, remember that series
they had a
against
duel
each other?
They're both in the 50s and one same game.
50s. Like, could you say Embiid in the first round of the playoffs not score 65 points in a game? Like,
sure.
I mean, thing with him is the free throw shooting. That's incredible for a big guy to shoot at that level. Like, okay, in terms of the 100-point game, let's say he goes 30 of 32 from the free throw line. That's not that far-fetched. Like, he could do that.
No.
So there's 30 points.
Especially with the way they referee him, with the way they officiate him. That's a whole other story.
Right. Give him 5 threes. So now he's up to 45. Again, the big thing, like you said, Jed, can he play 48 minutes or does the thing have to go into overtime or double overtime? So obviously that's a big thing. And by the time we got to double overtime, the guy would be spent. He's not the best conditioned athlete. Wilt was. That's a big difference. But the skill set, oh my God. I mean, he's at the same level as Olajuwon in terms of skill.
Yeah, I would say so. For what it's worth, Seth, he's 12th in the league in free throw percentage, which is incredible. And he takes by far the most free throws. Like, no one's even close to him in terms of free throw attempts per game. He's taking 12.2 free throw attempts a game. Giannis is a full free throw behind him. And then Giannis's free throw percentage obviously is 67, so it's nowhere near that. So, Embiid is shooting damn close to 90. He's legitimately one of the best free throw shooters in the league. It's not just volume, it's percentage.
Right.
He's one of the very best free throw shooters in the league. He's shooting free throws at a better clip than guys like Kevin Durant and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Devin Booker. He's shooting higher free throw percentage than those guys.
Crazy. And it's amazing when you consider that, again, and we keep talking about his lack of conditioning. I think he's gotten better at that. Sometimes at the end of the game with lack of conditioning, you miss free throws because you're just, quite frankly, exhausted. Well, he seems to still hit his free throws. He's such a wonderful player. And again, I'm shocked he's gotten even better this year. And to me, he's clearly the MVP of the league. The 100 points, that's an awful lot to ask for any player. I always thought it would be like a great 3-point shooter. Like, okay, Steph Curry's going to hit 15 threes in a given night. That makes the most sense. But again, a smaller player, not that he's not in condition, just the physical ask of that would be too much for a 6'3" guy.
It's the free throws that really.
It's the free throws that help you.
That's what ends up being the most. You score with no time going off the clock.
No time going off, and you get a chance to kind of breathe. And that, again, Wilt 28 of 32 from the line. So again, if Embiid did that in a given night, he's kind of on his way there. Now, Wilt hit 36 field goals. He took 63 shots. That's a shot and a half a minute. The Sixers going to do that. Could, in a given night, Tyrese Maxey get hot from three, opens up the court, and all of a sudden Embiid's working one-on-one down low, and good luck trying to stop him. He's unstoppable, even with double teams. I would like to see someone approach it. Kobe got 81,
right,
which was incredible. Kobe did it differently, obviously, but man, this guy is spectacular. And I felt bad for
Kobe played against an awful Raptors team when he did it, and his team was also awful, and that was just like the Kobe show. They were just giving him the ball.
But that was also an era of low scoring.
It was
like
no. That was the time not taking any away from Kobe's 81-point game. I mean, that was crazy.
Because 2000. I mean, that happened in 2005. So 5 years later, the Celtics beat the Celtics in Game 7 of the Finals, like 83-78. So 5 years earlier, he scored 81 in his own game. I always thought LeBron could make a run at it, but he just that's not how he plays.
Nope, doesn't
Durant
want to do it.
Could make a run at it, but that's not how those guys play. They just play the way you almost have to be a sociopath to do that, which Kobe certainly was. I don't even know if Embiid has that type of personality. Like, he could be a guy who has 75 with 5 minutes left, and he's still kind of there, and he's like, no big deal.
If Giannis shot free throws better, he could do it.
Right.
But he can't hit enough free throws. That's why his best game of all time was that finals game where he had, I think, 51, and he was 18 of 19 from the free throw line.
Yeah. That was the big thing. Free throws is where you get, again, those easy points that take no time off the clock. I can't think of anyone else. I mean, poor Karl Anthony Towns had 62, and no one remembers.
No one cares.
They lost the game too, and that's kind of Karl Anthony Towns, kind of the unassuming superstar in the league. He's not even the biggest superstar on his own team. That would be one Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, but it's exciting to see this scoring in the NBA and see this level of talent, and I think the 100 is safe. I don't think anybody's going to topple that. I do think the 63 in the playoffs is going to go within the next couple of years. Could go this playoffs. That it wouldn't surprise me at all. I do think somebody could touch Kobe's 81. That wouldn't shock me.
Absolutely,
100, I still would be absolutely floored. I would be shocked if someone does that. I think it's still untouchable for me.
Yeah, because when you think about it, someone got to 81% of what Wilt did. That's still 19% off. I mean, that's like Bonds hitting 73 home runs and the next closest guy being at like 59 or something like that.
Yeah, it's like a full really good game added on to what you just
another
did.
Quarter, a great quarter.
Yeah. So, but that's going to do it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Thanks to Full Press Coverage. Thanks to the NBA for all these exciting stories this week, keeping me and Sap busy. And go check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at JetStar. We'll be back next week, or maybe if there's more breaking news later in the week with a new podcast. So thanks for listening, everybody, and we will talk to you later. See ya.